Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself at 200 years old. Not your body, leave that aside. Think about your mind instead, the things you care about, the music that gets under your skin, the people you would do anything for, the beliefs you hold without even noticing how tightly you hold them, the fears you carry without fully naming. Now ask yourself, would any of that still be there? If you could sit across from your great-grandparents right now, they would probably feel strangely foreign to you, not just in their clothes or the way they spoke, but in what they valued, what they feared, what they considered shameful, what they considered worth living for. You might recognize them as family, but real understanding would take work. And they only lived around 80 years. So what exactly are we asking for when we talk about living 200 years, or 500, or forever? Somewhere inside the fantasy of endless sunsets and infinite tomorrows, there is a question people rarely stop to ask. If everything about you changes over centuries, your loves, your values, your memories, your idea of what matters, then at what point do you stop being the one who is living that life? At what point is it just someone else, still carrying your name? People have been wrestling with this for a very long time. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories we have, is built around this same longing. A king watches his friend die and becomes obsessed with finding a way to live forever. In the end, he fails. He returns home and realizes that the walls of his city will outlast him. That ending has stayed with us for thousands of years for a reason. The deepest problem with immortality may not be death at all. It may be identity. The self, the thing we imagine we are preserving, does not sit still. It shifts, it grows, it sheds things. Over enough time, it can become unrecognizable. And if that happens, what exactly was saved? That is why the old Ship of Theseus thought experiment still hits so hard. A ship sits in the harbor for years, and whenever a plank rots, it gets replaced. Then another is replaced, and another, until eventually every part of the ship is new. Is it still the same ship? Maybe, but then imagine someone saves all the original pieces and rebuilds the first version from them. Which one is the real ship now? There's no clean answer, and that is what makes it unsettling.
Because the same problem applies to us. Your body is already in flux. The material that made you up years ago is mostly gone. Even your mind is not fixed. Memory changes, values change, desires change. The pattern continues, but the contents keep shifting. Now stretch that process across centuries. The memories you have now would become faint. The things that feel central to you today might become trivial or incomprehensible later. At what point does the continuity stop meaning what you think it means? Would you even notice when it happened? Derek Parfit spent much of his life thinking about that question. His work on personal identity pushed on something most of us take for granted, the idea that there is some deep, solid core inside us that remains exactly the same over time. His famous teleportation thought experiment gets right to the point. You step into a machine on Earth. It scans you perfectly, destroys your body, and recreates you on Mars atom by atom, with all your memories and personality intact. Did you survive? Now make it worse. Imagine the machine malfunctions. It creates your duplicate on Mars, but you are still standing on Earth too. Both versions remember your life. Both feel like the original. Both have an equal claim to being you. So which one is actually you? Parfit's answer was disturbing because it refused to give the neat answer we want. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe the question itself is wrong. What matters, he argued, is not some invisible metaphysical essence, but psychological continuity. Overlapping memories, intentions, traits, and experiences. That continuity can weaken, it can branch, It can become thinner than we like to admit. And once you really sit with that, immortality starts to look less like preservation and more like transformation without end. The old myth of Tithonus makes the same point in a different language. Eos asks Zeus to make her lover immortal, but forgets to ask for eternal youth. So Tithonus keeps living, keeps aging, keeps fading. He does not die, but he does not remain himself either. Eventually, he becomes little more than a voice, then hardly even that. The story lasts because it captures a fear deeper than simple death. Not that life will end, but that the thing you wanted to preserve will slowly disappear while the process continues. Bernard Williams took that fear seriously. His argument was not just that immortality would become boring, which is the simplified version people often repeat. His real point was sharper. The desires and commitments that make your life distinctly yours are tied to the fact that your time is limited. The things that matter to you matter partly because your time with them is finite. Take something you love, a person, a place, a craft, a kind of work. Imagine having not just more time with it, but endless time. At first, that sounds beautiful, but over enough years, then decades, then centuries, even deep love would change under the pressure of endless repetition and total familiarity. And the world around you would not stand still. Everyone you knew would be gone. Then everyone they knew would be gone. The culture that shaped you would vanish. Then the next one would vanish too. An immortal person, Williams thought, faces two options. Either they hold on to their original character and become more and more alien to the world around them, like someone permanently displaced from their own time, or they keep changing so they can remain at home in each new era. But if they change enough, then the original person does not survive in any meaningful sense. What remains is a chain of selves linked together, not one enduring individual preserved forever. That is the part people tend to miss. We're not talking about a single self stretched endlessly across time. We're talking about a chain. And honestly, that chain already exists. The person you were at 15 is not here anymore. Their obsessions, their certainties, their sense of what life was going to be, most of that has already fallen away. You remember being them, but you are not them.
The same thing happened again at 20 and 25 and maybe 30. It will keep happening. The version of you reading this right now will one day feel as distant as your younger self does now. Usually we call that growth. We call it maturity. We call it change. We rarely call it a kind of death, even though something is lost each time. Parfit's point was that the connection between your present self and your future self may be real without being absolute sameness. It may be relation, not identity, a thread, not a permanent object, and threads can fray. So when people talk about wanting to live forever, I think the real question is this: what exactly are you trying to keep? Not your atoms, they were never stable to begin with. Not your memories, they are revised every time you revisit them. Not your values, those have already changed and will change again. Not even your personality, at least not in the fixed way people imagine. So what is the irreplaceable thing? Maybe there is something. Maybe there is not. Maybe what we call the self is less like a solid thing and more like an ongoing story, a pattern that keeps being rewritten while still somehow feeling continuous from the inside. If that is true, then immortality does not rescue the self. It only extends the process. It adds pages. Eventually, the voice changes, the priorities change, the whole shape of the life changes, and yet the story keeps being published under the same name. That is what makes the idea so unsettling to me. Not endless time itself, but the possibility that the person receiving that time would gradually stop being the one who asked for it.
And maybe that is already happening, all the time, in smaller ways. That does not have to be tragic. In some ways, mortality may be the thing that makes a human life hold together at all. Limits give shape. They make choices matter. They make love feel urgent. They make attention meaningful. If time were endless, nothing would truly need to happen now. Nothing would be a last chance. Nothing would be irretrievable. And if nothing is ever irretrievable, then a lot of what gives life its weight starts to loosen. Parfit once said that giving up the idea of a separate, permanent self made him less afraid. Not because death suddenly became pleasant, but because the thing he had been trying so hard to defend turned out not to be as fixed or as solid as he once thought. I keep coming back to that. The self you are right now, this arrangement of loves, fears, memories, loyalties, habits, is temporary. But that is not some cosmic mistake. That is what being alive is. We change slowly enough to feel continuous, but deeply enough that each version of us eventually gives way to the next. So maybe the question is not whether you will remain exactly yourself forever. You will not. The real question is simpler and harder. While you are this version of yourself, what are you doing with the time that belongs to them? Because one day, a future version of you will look back on this one, and what they find will depend on what you do now.